I'm already nervous about what the horror gatekeepers are gonna say about my opinions about these books. Hey ghouls and gals, my name is Taylor and today we are talking about my most disappointing / worst books that I read this year. I have 5 books on this list. I could have added a couple more, but I don't want this video to be too long just for the sole reason that I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about books that I hated. Narrowed it down to 5 books, the 5 worst / most disappointing books of the year. So the first 2 books that I'm going to talk about I would definitely put in the category of most disappointing as opposed to worst books. The last 3 are definitely ones that I'd more consider in that category, but the first 2 I would just say more than bad, they were just very disappointing to me. And the first book that I'm going to talk about is Be Not Far From Me by Mindy McGinnis. Now this was supposed to be a young adult story about a young woman who gets lost in the wilderness and has to survive the elements and make her way back home, or just simply survive. I believe it's set in the Appalachian Mountains, which can be very unforgiving terrain, and I think it was also set in like the fall or winter, which added more complexity to the story. I knew going into this it wasn't going to be like a survival horror. I really love survival horror, but I did think it was going to be more of a contemporary twist on a survival story and just a story about a girl trying to brave the elements and against all odds surviving. Unfortunately, that's just really not what I got from this story. First of all, the main character was terrible. She was not like other girls to the max. She spent the first couple chapters talking about how she's so much better than other girls because she doesn't care about clothes, doesn't care about makeup, doesn't care about boys, and she actually knows how to survive in the wilderness. She knows how to camp, she knows how to like hike and do everything better than the other girls around her. So first of all, we hate to see internalized misogyny. And let me clarify, I don't mind it in books if it's challenged and then the character overcomes it, or it's put in a negative light and challenged. This was never challenged at all. So that was just annoying to read from. But then secondly, when this girl gets lost in the woods, her whole entire personality is how she's better than everyone else around her because she knows how to be like this wilderness survivalist person, which she clearly does not. Now, I understand a lot of decisions that we'd make in these survival type situations are based off of primal instincts and panic. So who's to say what I would do? But I would assume if you spend all this time talking about how amazing you are and how much you know everything about the outdoors, that you maybe wouldn't have made so many mistakes as she did throughout this book. Like, I was a Girl Scout from ages 6 to 13 and not a very intensive Girl Scout. We didn't like do heavy duty camps or anything like that. Like, we'd camp, but it was definitely not survivalist stuff. But I knew some of these things that it either took her a while to realize or just she didn't know how to do, and I feel like in a way that was supposed to move the plot where, you know, bad things happen and she has to survive them. But I just felt like a lot of it she shouldn't be in that bad situation since her whole personality is knowing everything about the wilderness. I feel like I also could have overlooked that had that been the major point of the story, but almost more than half, I'd say pretty much half, maybe even slightly more than half of this story is told in flashbacks. So when she's in the wilderness, she's thinking back upon her relationships with different characters and different people in her life and just pivotal moments in her life leading up to this point. It ended up not being very much of like a survivalist story at all, and it just really wasn't what I signed up for. So I don't think this is bad writing, but it had several tropes that really irked me, and it just ended up not being a survival book at all. Like, a solid half of the book was set in her school, a contemporary setting, things like that, interacting with people. And there was also like a mystery element thrown in there about like a secondary character, an event. I feel like if the book would have focused on that, it would have been a better book and not had the flashbacks and just had this main character trying to do that secondary thing. If you've read this book, I feel like you know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to spoil it. So yeah, all in all, this wasn't a bad book. Mindy McGinnis is a really excellent writer, just had a lot of things that I wasn't a fan of and just ultimately wasn't the kind of book that I thought I was going to read. Now, the second book that I want to talk about that was a disappointing book of the year might be a surprise if you've watched other videos, because I definitely haven't really talked negatively about it. And again, not negative, it's not a bad book, just most disappointing. That's going to be Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Again, this wasn't bad, but it was definitely the most disappointing Riley Sager book by far. When I finished it, I didn't really have a lot of negative feelings about it. I didn't really have any feelings about it at all, but the more time that I've spent apart from it, I feel like that happens sometimes with favorite books or least favorite books. You don't know it in the moment when you finish it, but you spend so much time thinking about it after the fact that you're like, oh yeah, I mean, I didn't like it as much, or I loved it, you know? This book was definitely that for me. I finished, I thought it was okay. Definitely think this is the weakest of Riley Sager's books. The more I think about it, the more things in this book really irk me. Definitely I hate the comparisons to Haunting of Hill House, the TV show, because this is nowhere near as good as that. The only things that I would say that this is similar to is the fact that it's set in a haunted house. Other than that, I think the things that are really strong and what I love about Haunting of Hill House is strong family relationships, strong sibling relationships. You don't really have any of that in here. And I think that's pretty common for Riley Sager books, not complaining at all. He does an amazing job at creating atmosphere. His characters are like not the best parts about his story, but in a thriller, I can forgive that because it is about the atmosphere and plot a lot of the time. Like I said, this one, I just had so many high expectations for this. I went into this thinking without a doubt it was going to be my favorite Riley Sager book, and it wasn't. And I feel like this book also suffered from the ending of, okay, we need to think of the most jarring ending possible with lots of twists, and I just wasn't a fan of the twists in here. And I don't know if it's just me, but I really hate twists in thrillers sometimes. I feel like as someone who consumes a lot of true crime, I almost went to school for like criminology, so I've read a lot of true crime, I listen to true crime podcasts, I read a lot of fiction and nonfiction and just a lot of things in that arena, especially having to do with like psychology and people who commit crimes and stuff like that. And I just feel like sometimes thrillers try and make twists that are so bizarre that no one can see them coming. Sometimes I think that's a cop-out. I would rather have lots of characters that could do it and you're trying to figure out which one and maybe you guess who it is at the end of the book, but it makes sense, rather than someone who is behind things that just doesn't make sense at all. And I don't know why that's a pet peeve for thrillers, because obviously I read a lot of supernatural horror, I read a lot of fantasy. I can suspend my disbelief when it comes to books, so the fact that realism and the characters that would actually do something versus characters that sometimes actually are the people who did it shouldn't bother me as much as it does, but it does. And also, I'm just really tired of the trope. Slight spoilers for any of Riley Sager's books, honestly. I'm just really tired of female main characters in his books. They always either sleep with the person who did it or a person who they suspect has done it. Again, spoilers, but I'm not even talking about this book in specific. I'm talking about every single one of his books this has happened in. And I don't love that trope to begin with, but at this point, it's been in 4 out of his 4 books. I just really hope the next one doesn't have that trope. So yeah, definitely not a bad book. I had fun reading this book, but just the more distance that I take from it, the more that I kind of pick this book apart and see a lot of things that I really had issues with in reading it. Now we're moving on to books that I felt were bad. I really try not to use that designation of books that are just bad. I like to say they're bad for me, they may not be bad for you, and I don't want to say that they're a waste of time, because that's absolutely one of my pet peeves on booktube, when people will be like, your faves are trash, or this book was trash. There are a few exceptions, I think, but for the most part, people enjoy different things, and what is a terribly written book and that doesn't have anything that someone can like in one book may be someone else's favorite book. So I really hate saying that books are bad. So these 3 books I'm going to talk about aren't bad, but they just didn't really work for me, and that's okay. So maybe you'll listen to one of these reviews and think, wow, this actually is a book for me, and that would be great. I hate that I have to do such disclaimers, but some of these books are like, have like a cult following, and I just don't want to be attacked by that cult following. I'm not here for it. I'm here for discussion, and I'm more than happy to have discussion in the comments. But if you just have hatred, I'm probably gonna delete your shit. First book that we're gonna talk about that just didn't work for me was The Suicide Motor Club by Christopher Buehlman. And this one really upset me that I didn't like it, because The Lesser Dead by Christopher Buehlman was one of my favorite books of last year. So the fact that this book is in this video is a surprise to me. Like The Lesser Dead, The Suicide Motor Club is about vampires, and it is very grimdark and gritty, and I don't want to get too much into it because I feel like this synopsis, the title kind of gives it away, and if you read too much of the synopsis, you really kind of spoil most of what happens in the book. All I'll say is this was very dark and very gritty vampire stuff, which I normally like, but this felt very like gross and male-gazy and just frankly disgusting to be disgusting's sake, and just the violence perpetrated in here just was not to my cup of tea. Now, I think that was definitely a writing choice and a characterization choice. I don't think the author himself is a bad person because, again, like I said, I read The Lesser Dead. I absolutely loved it. These books just feel like they were written by two different people, and honestly, that probably means that Christopher Buhlin is a really, really good writer because the voices of the characters are so distinct in both of these books. They feel so different, which is crazy because they're dealing with very similar topics. They're dealing with vampires and dark situations. The Lesser Dead worked for me. This did not. I just didn't really like how a lot of the characters were written. I didn't really like what was going on. Just didn't like a lot of choices that were made here. And I can remember some of the graphic details and some of the violence towards women that happened in this book. I can't really recall specifics of the plot that I enjoyed, which is not always a bad thing. I definitely think The Lesser Dead focused more on like character interactions than an overall plot as well, but just this did not work for me. I'm really upset that I just didn't like it as much as The Lesser Dead. The next book that I'm gonna talk about, Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King, the first in the Bill Hodges trilogy. First of all, if you can tell from my background, I love Stephen King, so don't come after me, constant readers, for not liking this one. I do really love Stephen King. I think that's part of the reason why I hated this so much, because for me, this really didn't feel like Stephen King. It didn't really have a lot of the charm and a lot of the writing that I've grown to love in Stephen King. I've read a lot of his books. This one for me has been the weakest so far. Didn't like any of the characters in this one. And that's really important for me as a character-driven reader. Not only that, I felt like some of the characters were just written very poorly. I will say this about Stephen King. Obviously, I think Carrie came out in like the 70s, and I'm not trying to make justifications for anything, but a lot of norms were different in the 70s than they are now, and I think that's a very good thing. I think Stephen King does a really good job of, there are some genuinely problematic things, especially in his earlier books, that are problematic. You can still like the man, as I do. You can still like his books and recognize that there are some very problematic things in his earlier works, especially. As a whole, one of the things that I've really liked about Stephen King is that I feel like, for the most part, if it is criticism that is actual genuine criticism, I feel like he does take it and work on it. Like, I feel like his later books especially have gotten so much better in a lot of those problematic aspects, which is why this one, which is a fairly newer release, feels like one of his older books, just in the way that he writes about women and minorities and just a lot of things in general, which is so puzzling to me because, first of all, Holly Gibney, her whole character. I've read The Outsider. I love The Outsider. I love her character in The Outsider. Hated her in this book, and I didn't hate her. I hated the way she was written and just some of the really kind of gross and dismissive ways that her mental illness is like kind of a joke for Bill Hodges. I don't know, I really should have DNF'd this book. The only reason I finished this book was because it was Stephen King's, and I've heard great things about this trilogy. I wanted to continue this trilogy. I already have the second book on my bookshelf, and I had wanted to collect all of Stephen King's work because I'm a completionist like that, but I don't know if I'm going to continue on with the series because this was just a disappointment. I didn't like it. It just didn't feel like a Stephen King book, and it wasn't good in the way that I know his writing can be and I know his books can be. So I understand this is a favorite for a lot of people. It just didn't really work for me. Quite frankly, did not like it. I don't really like Bill Hodges as a character. I don't know. Maybe I'll watch the TV adaptation in between trying to figure out whether I should pick up the second book in the series and see if that iteration warms me to the character at all, because I know a lot of people love him, but I can't stand him. And then the last book that I really did not like in this year of 2020 was House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielowski. This one I was so excited about because it merged a ton of things that I love. This has a story within a story. It has a really unique format, which I normally think is really cool, and it is about a haunted house. Not a haunted house, but it's paranormal horror set largely within a house. So for all those reasons and the fact that this is such a cult classic really made me want to pick this up. and I hated it. And I feel really bad saying it because I was so excited to pick this book up. It just really was not the book for me. The format is really cool. It's really cool in theory, but a lot of times it does get really tedious to read. There are a lot of times where you want to kind of see what's happening in the main story, and then you get bogged down in like 3 or 4 pages of footnotes in another secondary story, which I didn't really like. Honestly, I thought this could be a really incredible haunted house or like paranormal house horror story if it was written in a more traditional way, which I'm sure is a super unpopular opinion. I just really did not like the secondary things that were happening in the footnotes. I know that's a story all in of itself, but I just didn't care about it. This is not scary, which is okay. I don't think horror needs to be scary to be effective or good. I know a lot of people don't want to pick this up because a lot of people say this is the scariest book of all time. I think the format and some of the concepts in here make it more like unsettling than truly scary, I would say. And I definitely think if you've been putting this off because you're so scared to pick this up because it's the scariest book of all time, I say go for it. It definitely starts out really slow too, so you can kind of dip your toes in without being terrified if you're worried about this book. This, I just felt like I was interested in the concepts, but then whenever I'd pick it up, it was so tedious to work through. There wasn't enough going for it for me to like it. I didn't like the characters. Like I mentioned, I don't like one of the stories going on in here. I did enjoy the other one, but I felt like that kind of took a back burner to the other story that I didn't like as much some of the time. Again, this is just me being a super big character-driven reader. This just wasn't the book for me, and the format a lot of times made this feel like work, which I read for fun. And I was seeing a lot of reviews saying like, oh, if you didn't like it the first time, just go ahead and read it the second time and focus on new things. And I don't think you should need to have to read a book multiple times to enjoy it or to understand it. I mean, I understood it, I just didn't like it. And maybe I didn't understand it as much as the people who, I know there are like whole forums dedicated to this book, whole websites and Reddit threads and what have you. I don't think that you need to spend extensive like undercover work and like really picking apart a book, especially a fiction book that you're just reading for fun to enjoy. But if you really like that deep undercover things, there's a really amazing community that's really dedicated to really deep diving in this book. But if you enjoy really deep diving into certain things, I think you'll really enjoy this book. It just was not the right experience for me. So yeah, this one was disappointing too. I mean, they were all disappointing. I would say all of the books on this list, none of them are bad. They're just not books for me. I really don't know why I did this video because I really hate being negative. I don't like negative reviews, so making a whole video based on like the 5 worst books that I thought were just the least engaging to me this year. It's a weird choice for me, but there you have it. Those are the 5 most disappointing / worst books to me that I read in 2020. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, keep it respectful. Different opinions are opinions, they're not fact. So I know I keep reiterating that, but I feel like every time I post Stephen King content, I'll get at least like one comment saying like how I'm not like a real Stephen King fan if my opinions don't exactly match theirs. So just keep it respectful. That's all I ask. I'm more than happy to have discussions with people of differing opinions, but I'm not here for that negativity. I know this was kind of a negative video, but I tried to make it as informative as possible. Definitely didn't want to sit here and just saying this book is trash, this book is trash for 10 minutes because I'm not about that. So anyway, feel free to subscribe for more content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all on the other side. Bye!